Sometimes it feels like you and me against the world. When all the others turn their backs and walk away, you can count on me to stay. Remember when the circus came to town and you were frightened by the clown? Wasn't it nice to be around someone that you knew, someone who was big and strong and looking out for you and me against the world? Sometimes it feels like you and me against the world. And for all the times we've cried, I always felt that God was on our side. And when one of us is gone, and one of us is left to carry on, then remembering will have to do. Our memories alone will get us through. Think about the days of me and you and me against the world. And when one of us is gone, and one of us is left to carry on, then remembering will have to do. Our memories alone will get us through. Think about the days of me and you and me against the world.
I'm doing video number 2. Justice was not served for Daniel. It is also my son's anniversary of his passing today. Passed away January 9th, 2010. And hopefully he'll be proud of me for trying to get the word out. I'll start off by saying, hi, it's Kathleen. I'm back. I would first like to wish you all a happy, healthy new year. I hope you were able to view my video number 1 on group home abuse involving our most vulnerable disabled in a falling system. When I released my first video, I was quite hyped up over finally being able to set my son Daniel and myself free from what has been hidden for so long, involving my son's experience in his group home journey with UCP of New York City, now named ADAPT, the group home he wanted so much. After my son finally made his move into the New York residence in 1990, I made sure the studio apartment was in move-in condition after many months of planning, also making sure his ADL care was in place to secure his safety. I was reassured over and over by the administration that safety would be a top priority for my son's care. This was most important due to the issue of the bathroom not being fully wheelchair accessible at the time. I was also reassured again by the administration that after my son moved in, the bathroom facility would be completely renovated. I was again informed it would be made much easier to have it renovated when my son had his so-called foot in the door. Promises, promises. That is all I heard from the very start of Daniel's joining the residence. What it all came down to was broken promises. As I stated in video number 1, Executive Director Edward R. Matthews was going to be a blocking stone for my son to have his wish of residing in a Brooklyn group home next to his day program. But all because I went to the State Department, that was not going to be happening. The residence was in crisis from the very start of Daniel's stay. The head director of all residences told me face to face, if my son did not want to stay, he would be moved right away. To me, they were no more promises. They were just lies, lies, and more lies. Now my son was very upset because he would be leaving his 20-year program in Brooklyn and also leaving behind his lifelong friends to go to the agency's program in New York City. I was now facing a battle I did not foresee before the group home journey started. I could not fathom, with all the adversity, pain, and suffering my son endured to survive after his near-fatal car accident in 1968, he then would be put intentionally in harm's way by an agency he joined over 20 years ago. Oh, how wrong I was. As a mother who loved her son and wanted the best for him, I was now facing a long journey of potential destruction by a lone wolf in sheep's clothing. I believed as a mother and advocate for my son, there was no doubt I could secure his safety with me in the picture. Wrong again. My voice for my son was a poison pen to the executive director, Mr. Bully himself, running the one-man show with all the clout. Everyone else I tried to contact in the higher-ups in the administration, he blocked me in reaching them. All my complaints I wrote about him went directly back to him. That did nothing but light the fire he already had burning inside him concerning me. He was a bully having his way like a child taking candy from a baby. Mr. Bully even tried to perceive me as a troublemaker, but that failed. Why? Because Mr. Bully was wearing the sheep's clothing, not I. My now being the squeaky wheel, I continued on to fight for my son's rights and needs. That was turning out to be a long and grueling journey to have my son move to Brooklyn back to his program. I promised my son I would do everything I could to respect his wishes. My big mistake. I was now at the point to throw in the towel and remove Daniel and take him back to our home. Daniel was strong-willed in what he wanted. This is how he made it through with all his challenges and obstacles since his accident. I truly started out believing that this was going to be easy to move my son. But as time passed, I realized this was becoming a distant reality. I was now on my way to entering a boxing ring I did not want with some bad apples, running a farce of a show, and dealing with the lone wolf in sheep's clothing. I could not fathom what was in store for my son and family. I was at the residence on a continuous basis, working with the resident secretary, Mrs. B., who played the part of a director and did a remarkable job on a full-time basis to try and keep the resident up and running for the consumers. This woman truly cared for all of them. Her husband, who was not employed with the agency, was up at the residence daily, fixing many things that needed to be done that the administration was responsible for to oversee and did not. When I asked the secretary what happened, that her husband was up there doing all the repair work and not the administration, she stated it was easier having her husband doing it than asking the administration for any kind of help. By now I was having problems with the resident nurse, who believed she was the consumer's only salvation. She did not want my son there and expressed this to me every time I came to visit, that he was not a good candidate for the residents. When I voiced this to the administration, I was told to ignore her. 5 months later, into my son's stay, the nurse had my son committed to a New York City hospital, stating to the doctors he was saying things, hallucinating. I was not called and informed by the administration that she had my son admitted until hours later after the fact. Then the call came to my home to me by a staff member. Due to my being so upset that my son was admitted into the hospital psychiatric ward, my daughter did not want me to go up that night. My daughter and her friend immediately went to see Daniel. He was drugged up, could hardly talk, tied down to his bed in a room with no TV. All the outlets were covered, and there was a guard outside his door telling him to shut up, that he was never going home again, calling him a retard. My daughter was not only traumatized by what the guard said, but she could not believe the state that her brother was in. Let me tell you, if I was to have gone up that day, I would have caused havoc for what was done to my son, and I would have been locked up myself. The resident nurse did not want my son there to begin with. This was her way of getting him out, or she thought. She convinced the doctors my son was saying things and talking to people who were not there. Against the doctor's orders not to admit him, they complied because of her insisting. I arrived very early the next day with all the intentions of taking my son back home. My son now was sitting in his wheelchair in the middle of the corridor. I went and put my arms around him. He looked so exhausted and so sad that they would do this to him. All I wanted was to get him out of there. The doctor stated he was very sorry what happened and admitted my son should not be there. And that time I just wanted to hurt the nurse from the administration. I wanted to go after Mr. Edward R. Matthews, the bully. The doctor also informed me that Daniel never showed any symptoms the nurse stated he had when they had him admitted. When I was signing the release papers, I was also shown the admission form where the nurse put next to Kim signed her name. I believe the executive director and the nurse conspired to have my son admitted so I would be angry enough to leave the agency. This was all the work of one man's witch hunt against my son and family. Please stay tuned for video number 3. There's much more to come. I want to thank you all for watching and listening. Please feel free to comment,